Morning and good afternoon and good day, wherever you may be in the world. My name is Baso Nzenze, and I am with the University of Johannesburg Department of Politics and International Relations, as well as a non-resident fellow with the Africa Policy Research Institute in Berlin, today's host for this very special webinar. And so a few months ago, APRI and the University of Johannesburg decided to partner on a special initiative looking at BRICS Plus in the wake of the formal expansion of BRICS that took place last year in the lead up to this year's summit to observe and to reflect. And we issued a call for papers, and the response was just so overwhelming from all over the world, with scholars and researchers looking at various aspects of this BRICS formation. And so today is a launch of sorts, because some of these authors are here today to discuss their research, their papers, but also to reflect on the recent BRICS summit held in Russia. But also, I think everything that has happened since the summit, because quite a lot of developments have taken place, including the G20 summit in Brazil, which is also a BRICS member, including COP29 in Azerbaijan, as well as the election in the US. And the president-elect there over the weekend already had some strong words, some strong thoughts with regards to the BRICS, threatening that if they try to move away from the dollar, that there will be 100% tariff on the BRICS members. So suffice it to say that this is a very relevant and ongoing matter that I think is going to become only more important for us to look at as the years unfold. And so to help us unpack this, we are joined, as I said, by authors of various papers that are in the special issue. And the link has already been shared, and I think will be reshared in the chat box so that you can access those papers. And so to kick off our conversation, I'd like for our speakers to introduce themselves and to, in their view, very briefly, tell us, in their opinion, just briskly, whether this recent summit was among the most important or among the least important of the BRICS summits, because they come in waves, right? Some are more important than others. And so to get us started, I will go first to Nzalama Matebula.
Thank you, Prof. And thank you to all our listeners. Thank you to APRI and UJ for this very crucial initiative that is very timely and relevant, seeing that there's an expansion of BRICS and what it means for the world, in terms of the geopolitics. So my name is Nzalama Matebula from the University of Johannesburg. I'm an assistant lecturer with the Department of Politics and International Relations. And yes, I would argue that this was one of the most important summits, considering the expansion itself and what it means for the world going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Then we go to Olawale Yemisi.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof, and good day to everyone. My name is Olawale Yemisi. I'm with the Department of History, University of Ibadan, Nigeria, and I will also agree with that the fact that this BRICS summit is the most important one, given the expansionist membership of the BRICS, and secondly, because of the Russia-Ukraine war effect, and having the summit at this particular time is like redefining the space of Russia from one of isolationism and trying to bring all other countries together. So it is very important because it shapes the world politics, that BRICS meeting, and like the anchor of the program said, that US is already making some threats. So it is a very, very strategic meeting, and it's going to shape the world in the next 1 or 2 years. We're going to see a lot of critical events happening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Olawale. Then we go to Mihaela. Same question.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for the organizers. So my name is Mihaela Papa. I'm at MIT Center for International Studies doing BRICS research. And I would actually agree with my colleagues. This was one of the most significant summits. And the reason for that is that it was a big test whether the expanded group can work together, and they showed that they can work together, and also that they can innovate together and start new initiatives and create a setup where more ambitious members can move forward if they want, and for example, for monetary integration initiatives. And of course, to follow up on Olawale's point, the question of addressing geopolitical conflicts was front and center, and before it was a red line. So I think that was also transformative.
Thank you very much, Mihaela. Then we go to Rocio.
Yes, well, thank you. I'm glad to be here, and thank you to APRI and organizers and the colleagues. Well, I am a sociologist. I am a recent PhD candidate for the National Scientific and Technical Research Council in Argentina. So I would like to clarify this because this is my first webinar, and here there are a lot of colleagues that are specialists in these topics. So, well, with this clarify information, I will agree with my colleagues, and to not repeat what you mentioned before, I will highlight the expansion and the members that were incorporated as Egypt, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and United Arab Emirates, because they show us a question about climate change and the challenges between expand the bloc and the NDB, that is my topic. And particularly, these are the most important oil and coal producers. So that show a new challenge to the bloc and to the bank. I think.
Thank you very much, Rocio. And we should say Rocio is in Argentina, which received an invitation last year to join the BRICS, but there was a change in government, and that did not come to be. Maybe a little later on, Rocio can enlighten us as to why that changed. Then we go to Gift.
Okay, good day, colleagues. Thank you so much, Prof, for this opportunity. And I just want to thank the organization. So my name is Gift Mahamata, and then I'm a lecturer at the University of Limpopo under the Department of Development Planning and Management. So my reflection in terms of BRICS, in terms of what transpired in the meeting, because I remember I wrote a piece whereby I spoke about the pros and cons, in terms of unified monetary system. And indeed, it was part of the BRICS meeting whereby the BRICS pay, it was also introduced. So I think because of that, that's what led to the new president of America now to start gunning for BRICS, to say that, no, we can't allow that to happen. But I've also seen that President Putin just released a statement this morning. So we'll engage further in terms of talking about the unified monetary systems, what are its benefits for all BRICS countries plus, and then also both advantages, disadvantages, and even its opportunities and also the implications. So thank you so much, Paul.
Thank you very much, Gift. So in fact, I think let's go to you to get us going in terms of the discussion, because you wrote a paper on the proposed idealized idea of a BRICS currency. And as you've rightly alluded to it, it's become a newsmaker over the past week, past few days. So is the world any closer to seeing an actual BRICS currency based on this recent summit and some of the moves that you are seeing within the BRICS?
Okay. No, thank you so much, Prof. What I can say is that we are not getting any closer, but there's a light. I can say that there's a light because remember that the moment you talk about BRICS Plus, we are talking about a lot of countries that have diverse economies. and for that to happen, because the BRICS countries consist of developed countries, it consists of developing countries, so it will take a lot of coordination and compromise. That is why it cannot be rushed into having the BRICS currency, because we must consider those factors due to that difference or diverse economies, and also in terms of currency trust and demand. The currencies lack global trust acceptance, making it difficult for them to replace the dollar, because it's not easy to replace the dollar, because there's a saying that when America coughs, all countries catches flu. You understand? So because of that statement, it has threatened some of the countries. That is why it will be a huge step for all BRICS plus countries to continue to have a unified currency, or maybe to have that BRICS pay. So it takes a lot of trust, and it also takes a lot of policies, and also take in terms of how can even countries benefit more out of that? Because some countries, they will debate, say that no, we'd rather stick with the US rather than trying something new, of the BRICS currency. So that is why it's something that cannot be rushed, and it's something that we cannot say that we can have it in 2 years, in 3 years. No. It's going to take some time. But as I say that, there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
Mm-hmm. No. Thank you very much, Gift. I think we'll come back to that point, because it's one of the sort of hot areas when we consider the BRICS and its potential, and also, I suppose, for some countries, it's BRICS is a threat. It's on this monetary issue. So I think we can go to Rocio, because since we are on the theme of finance, right? And one of the key achievements of the BRICS so far has been the New Development Bank. And so what is this institution? What is this NDB, and how has it performed so far in your assessment?
Perfect. Well, I have some notes to guide my presentation. Well, first of all, we think, Andrea and I, and we are starting, as I mentioned before, with this analyzing the NDB. It's an instrument, a financial instrument that BRICS create. Of course, the proposal by the India was very near to the financial crisis in 2008, as we know, but the creation or the operational state of the bank started in 2016, and I think that we could connect this process with the process of BRICS, because although it's important that they are added some new members, well, the process is a bit slowly. Both the bloc and the bank, no? And these are some challenges that these institutions have to face, because at the same time they are not supposed to replace the traditional multilateral banks or traditional Bretton Woods. Instead of that, they try to influence in the agendas, in a reform of these institutions. And the same we could say about the G20 and other institutions, or the forums. So this bank, of course, started with a huge objective that was related to the need of these countries, these emerging countries or in developing countries, to grow. Now, that was one of the necessities that the traditional architecture system or the financial architecture can't answer to this objective. So the bank was created first because of this, and then to the challenge to expand the members expand the capital to lend, because that is another problem between quotes that the bank has. One of the criticism that some members said to the bank is that what they lend, it's a very little comparing with the another institutions. So, of course, the bank has learned about yes, about the operational statement that the bank has, and they sorry, and why they are not so different, or they want to replace the traditional system, because formally we see that the bank commitment to climate change, for example, goals, and this is related to these forums that we mentioned before. But apart from that, they had the challenge to growth, to help members to growth. So the objectives of the bank change through the time. They expand their objectives to include climate change commitments. But if we focus on the numbers, the loans they approved, we could stress that the bank have sub commitments related to the objectives that are related to lending in local currency. They commitment to approve 30% of non-sovereign lendings, and apart from that, on local currency. They couldn't until today reach these objectives, and apart from that, and related to the changes in the objectives, the sectors are not very clear. The K sector, as they named, related to infrastructure, but related to climate change, no? Because if you change your objectives, your sectors will change. We hope we change. They will change. So these are some challenges that the bank has. And I related this to the bloc, because although they are not the same, because some members that belong to the bloc are not necessarily members of the bank, although there is a bridge between them. And these different characteristics or process, of course, are related, but it's important to difference themselves. But I think that the bank need to show the members that they are different, in which, particularly local currency, that is the main challenge that they need to face these years. And then I would like to stress, we could talk about the differences in the organizational structure related to the board of directors, related to the way in which members vote. But if the bank is not a practical answer to these countries, it's difficult to face the global challenges or change the agendas. And to finish, I have some points that we mentioned about these new members that are very close to the to the oil and coal and gas production. That is a challenge. And another one, and I remember one of the first director of the bank mentioned in an interview recently that one of the problems is that the bank is very slow to approve the projects and to this project starts. It starts. That is something important if the bank want to difference itself from the Bretton Woods, at least the World Bank. There is another multilateral bank to compare NDB, and transparent a bit more the information, because if you research about the bank, you could find some projects, but it's hard to get the main idea, the main objective of the project, who are there, and another details. So quickly, I would say that characteristic and that challenges.
Thank you very much, Rocio. You've taken us through the workings of the NDB, I think, in quite a comprehensive way, and raised some important questions there. And I think one of the important aspects that you raise is this idea of the BRICS trying to present alternatives, alternatives away from the traditional system, the status quo. And so on that, I'm thinking, Nzalama Matebula, you write quite a lot on international law, and I think you're well positioned to take us through in terms of what is the attitude of the BRICS countries towards international law as it currently exists, or as it has existed, perhaps I could say, since the end of the Second World War.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for that question. So I would like to just have this dual approach on this matter, to say that there's a collective BRICS approach towards international law, and then you have separate countries and how they would perceive international law and how they receive it. So collectively, many of the BRICS countries as a bloc, they treat international law as a legal instrument that actually has much potential to not only change the system as it is. So they do believe that international law has a place within our geopolitical setting, but at the same time, there's this belief that it can be enhanced, it can be better, it can be more accommodative to a multilateral and multipolarity structure that the BRICS aims towards. So what does this mean in terms of the economic law, in terms of, so they believe that international law has a place in solving international conflict in the most legal and permissible way. And then it has some potential in restructuring the financial monetary system as we know it today. But at the same time, now moving to the second argument on how many of these BRICS countries actually receive international law. So, for example, we have South Africa, which its constitution is quite friendly to international law. It is quite transformative and it's friendly to international law. So they do believe in the significance of adhering to international law as it is. And then we have China, who either can benefits and exploits international law in the same in the same way. So what does this mean is that they are able to use it in the most feasible way to their own benefit in terms of introducing new legal norms. And the paper that they say that I wrote actually spoke so much on what we would call post-international theory and heterarchy, on how legal norms feature so much into the geopolitical setting as we know it today. So China can either influence international law through their legal norms and how they can actually be transformed into international law, but at the same time, seeing that they're not part of the Rome Statute, they can exploit it too, because they do not have to be held accountable, provided that there is a matter that requires international law and it is prosecutable under international law. And then we have Russia, for example, Russia, who believes that international law is a UN-based system that is quite narrow. It exhibits double standards, and this makes a lot of sense considering how they received the execution, the warrant of arrest, which was issued by the International Criminal Court. So now we get to then understand that international law in its current state, it can either be taken from a collective point of view on how countries see it. So from a BRICS point of view, it is fine. No, it is a good instrument. It is really a law, but it can be enhanced to further accommodate the multilateral order. But at the same time, you have a number of countries, in their own individual rights that actually receive it in various forms. And the reason why we have such diverse views, different views across the board, it's because international law doesn't exist on its own. It exists within international relations, and there are a number of aspects and factors, dynamics that influence what international law is. So this simply means that international law can either influence your policy into something, or you can influence international law. So that depends. That's a quite realistic approach or argument that you would pose within international relations, to say that you may have power to influence international law to a certain extent, or international law itself is a supreme law above all land, above all states. It can influence your policy in one way. And I can actually allude to the example of South Africa last year when we had to host the BRICS Summit, whereby we had to take the non-alignment stance because it was a quite hard position. It was an unpleasant position, because we have to understand that international law, the Constitution of South Africa itself, doesn't exist on its own. It exists within an economic setting, within a policy setting, but also sovereignty, what we allude to as sovereignty. So then what you find is there's this constant constantation or disagreements between international law as the most supreme and high law of land. And then you have supremacy. You have sovereignty, which cuts across that blanket that says countries are free to be what they want to be and act however they want to act. So then that is the contestation. And to a certain extent, then that actually leads us to question the the obligatory character of international law, to say, you have a number of questions asking as to, is international law really a law? Is it a law that we shelf in many courts, or is it a law that we can practice? And yes, it is different from domestic law because it exists within different remits. It has its own court system, so its legal system is quite different, but definitely it does exist. It is a law, and it is received in many fronts. And I do believe that there is, as we progress, international law also progresses with the BRICS countries. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Nzalama. So what I'm hearing is, in effect, that in as much as the different BRICS countries have different views, have shared views with regards to international law, at the same time, they have different views amongst each other. And you couldn't get all of them to agree on a single convention that would have to be written on a specific matter. And so that leads me to Mihaela, who you've also written quite a lot on BRICS expansion. So I'm hoping you can take us through BRICS expansions over the years. What have been the sort of waves that you have seen? And is the BRICS ultimately stronger or more diluted? Because there's also been mention around trust that I think Gift mentioned, the importance of trust in these relationships. So is the BRICS ultimately stronger or more diluted as a result of these expansions?
Thank you so much. These are great questions. So I named my contribution the magnetic pull of BRICS. And the reason was because I wanted to look at what is actually attracting countries to BRICS, and can the group sustain its appeal? And when we look at the international relations literature, Usually there is a lot of debate about how formal international organizations attract members and what is the politics of their membership. So, for example, there is talk about the compliance pool of formal organizations like the WTO. So you have these incentives to participate through legal obligations and then penalties for non-compliance. But when we move to the informal group space, there is much less understanding of the politics of enlargement. And here, in terms of BRICS, why would countries want to be there? What are the drivers behind expansions, and to what extent the whole process plays out has been quite understudied. So when we look at the literature, we could see, like, for example, there is decline of alliances. States want to pursue multi-alignment. There is a status-seeking component, changing the system component, links to China and different economic prospects. People are saying compound soft power, pooling of decision-making, history of South-South cooperation, anti-colonial movement, all of that basically feeding into this large demand for BRICS. But of course, this has always been there. So why this surge in membership and in demand for membership? And I was drawing on the concept by Belant and Cox on ideas as coalition magnets. And the question how certain ideas gain traction and are promoted by policy entrepreneurs, because it's not only enough that the ideas are there, but who is actually promoting them? And how are these ideas used to frame interests, mobilize supporters, and build coalitions? So the framework there is that the success of an idea in coalition building depends on its positive emotional appeal or valence, and capacity for multiple interpretations, ambiguity. And if we look at the first enlargement, where the group started as BRIC as an independent institution, self-standing entity, it was BRIC, Brazil, Russia, India, China. And then we had to 2010 when South Africa was invited to join. But when we look at how South Africa came about, to be interested in BRICS, it wasn't really that like BRIC had some joining criteria. It was more a very extensive negotiation campaign that South Africa felt that it belonged to the club and made its case to BRIC and basically convinced other BRIC countries to accept it. And then when we get to the second enlargement that happened in August of 2023 during South Africa's presidency, it's a completely different model. 40 countries expressed interest before the summit, 23 submitted formal applications, but there were no criteria until the summit. But what actually happened beforehand was a major milestone event, 2022 summit, which actually created this mobilization around expansion and made expansion possible. So here we have basically this combination of demand and supply. And 6 countries were invited to join, 4 countries joined, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, United Arab Emirates. And then now, it's not really clear if we can call it officially the third enlargement, but actually, formally, a Kazan declaration says that there is a partner country category. The third enlargement is specific because first there was a big decision by BRICS that there will be a pause of full membership. And this pause never happened. Of course, nobody was accepted as a full member, but there was this partner country category as a basically innovation for the institutional format. Another aspect of the third enlargement is that there is much more emphasis on consolidating the global majority and framing BRICS as the core of the system and as the global majority. And now the applications are still coming, the interest is still there, and the fact that the 13 countries represent major players means that basically we are looking at BRICS at a whole new level. The core ideas have acted as a magnet, but what really made a difference was the fact that BRICS managed to show that ideas work and that these ideas can be translated into organizations and into specific initiatives. So it's not only like the idea as attraction, but basically concrete action that follows the idea and all the policy entrepreneurship and framing that that basically follows that. So the continuing appeal of Global South, increasing voices of the Global South, increasing South-South cooperation, working toward true multilateralism is visible across all of the states in terms of what they say, why they wanted to join. So finally, I wanted to reflect on this question of, is BRICS stronger or weaker and more diluted? There is always a trade-off when new countries are being accepted, whether the priority is on inclusion or on effectiveness. And these two are not necessarily moving in the same direction. So it wasn't clear who would be included. And this is where we see the constraints on this magnetic pull, because even despite the fact that countries were invited, they weren't all included because some of them changed their minds. Like we said, Argentina, Saudi Arabia, it's still not clear where it is and what is the future prospect. But what can be observed is that changes in government definitely significantly impact membership interest and participation, and that some countries have real concerns that their joining will heighten tensions with the West. I think the larger question is, what is the end goal of expansion? Is it to create to consolidate the global majority? Is it to create a completely new form of cooperation? And how to avoid some of the problems that prior efforts had, like, for example, the new international economic order failed due to a lack of internal cohesion, and G77 has also not been as effective because it became too big. So the most important point, I think, in terms of the format of the group moving forward is that there is this opportunity for a multi-track approach that's visible in Kazan Declaration. So the most ambitious countries can move on certain initiatives and others can opt in if they want. And that's possibly a way to manage this inclusion and effectiveness problem. So I think I should stop here. We also see that there has been some learning how expansion should happen. So you saw that we have not received formal announcement of countries, so that there is no like repeat of, you announce like, oh, these countries are joining, and they don't end up joining. So there has been some institutional learning. And with that, I think, yeah, I can close with that. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that, Mihaela. I think highlighting the lessons that have been learned through the different waves of enlargement and this kind of observer group of countries. I think the point about this being a kind of waiting room to see if you really mean it when you say you want to join BRICS has been a definite lesson from the Argentine experience and Saudi Arabia's ambiguity. Now, moving on, so turning to Africa, we've seen a lot of coups on the continent. Now, interestingly, a lot of the new members were African countries, Egypt and Ethiopia in particular. And I think there's something to be said there as well about the tension between these two particular countries and what they hold for the future of the BRICS. But turning more towards Western Africa in the Sahel and just generally in West Africa, we've seen a lot of coups, but also a lot of interest by BRICS countries in that part of the world. And so my question to Olawale is, how do the BRICS countries react to these coups? What's been their reaction? And what is the state of relations that they have with some of these coup-afflicted countries in that part of the continent?
Okay, thank you very much. I'm very grateful to Professor Hada. She did well when I was in the process of preparing the paper, so I should extend my formal greetings to her. Yeah, and secondly, I will try and continue from where Miela stopped, that what is the goal of expansionism? And also, Cleopatra also mentioned the fact that the goal of international relation, whether it is a law or I will take my argument right away from there. Hello, can you hear me, please?
Yes.
Yes. Also, I will take my argument right away from there that the major point of argument about the BRICS presence in Africa is the fact that Africa has always been the theater of international politics. And, you know, when a particular group or an international organization or a group in the context of BRICS, as Miela have said, is trying to dislodge maybe an anti-Western or anti-American new liberal order, Africa has always been the major center point. And, you know, that is where they can assert their influence, just as the period of colonial rule. So when it comes to the BRIC presence in Africa, we talk about China, Sino-African relation. We talk about the sale of weapons, which is one of the major core areas of Russia. And we talk about trade, in which Brazil and India. And when we take the expansionism of the thing, Africa was able to have a two space. Egypt and Ethiopia were included in the BRICS group. So between 2020 and 2023, you know, Africa was faced with a lot of coup crises and coup here and there. And it has always been the nature of African Union to denounce coup and establish the fact that the military junta government should return power to the democratic elected government. And, you know, we also have all other regional economic corporations like ECOWAS and SADC who also make a formal complaint that, no, there can be, having military coup at this particular period is retrogressing democratic values in Africa. So for the BRICS, their involvement in the military junta and everything is about the political dimension of their relation with Africa. And, you know, the major core argument of the paper is to establish, I think in the conclusion of the paper, I was able to establish the fact that if I take the argument that BRICS is an anti-American or anti-Western group, you know, the only way you can dislodge an anti-Western group or an anti-American group is only if you have unity. And that is with unity in decision, unity in the economic aspect, in the political aspect, and every other thing you do. But if you bring it down to the military coup in West Africa and African sub-region, you know, all the BRICS members had different reactions. And, you know, that calls for questioning that what is the major key or philosophy that is guiding the establishment and expansionism, as Miela said, of this group. You know, for instance, in the work, I was able to establish the fact that Russia was engaging herself in coup protection regimes, because for the case of Burkina Faso, the case of Niger Republic, once there is a coup d'etat, the first place the military junta will pay visits to is Moscow. And, you know, before you have it, we have the Wagner group, who they are going to send all in the name of assisting those countries to quench terrorism and insurgency. And, you know, apart from that, the Chinese position about this coup was totally different. Chinese, they maintain what we call a non-interventionist position. They are not having any business with the coup. Their own major business is to establish the fact that trade, okay, just give me what I can buy and what I can sell, and I can make African a market, and, you know, you increase your foreign direct investment and your Belt and Road BRI initiative and build infrastructures. That was their goal. The major goal of China was not about who is in government. That's not their business. The most important aspect of their own presence in Africa, Sino-African relation, is that whoever is in government must relate with the Chinese, and Chinese should be able to maintain their presence. And, you know, we have a lot of statistics about their investment in Africa that keeps rising all over the years. And we have the case of Brazil and India and even South Africa, which is an African country, also maintaining a minimalist stand. You know, they are not much during the Niger coup in 2023, what India just did was just to announce that the India citizens in Niger should just leave the country. They are not even concerned about the what happened in Niger. And you know, this is a country. What I'm saying in essence, or the core argument of the paper is the fact that when there is a group, you know, when we are talking about American and Europe, even if we are talking about the underdevelopment we are facing, you know, this group, they seems to have a very common agenda, and you know, they agree on some key principles which they use to extend their relations to Africa. Fine. The major goal of BRICS is to come to Africa and dislodge the American and European influence. Okay, but the approach to this particular event is that each group is each member of the country is just pursuing their own. They are doing their own thing. Goal. Hello, please, can you hear me? So they don't have a unified goal. Yeah, they don't have a unified goal. So they are just involving themselves in different approach to the political matter. So the second question talking about the differences, the nuances. Yes, there are differences in the approach to military coup. And the conclusion of the paper, which I also emphasized, and I was very happy that was what APRI used to do some kind of online thing, and you know, was that if BRICS is going to dislodge America in any ramification, maybe on the international stage, maybe in the Middle East, or maybe in Africa, the concept of unity. And now talking about the expansionism, you know, the question now is that in what way is Russia as the leading goal, as the leading country under BRICS, is going to align all countries that are just brought under the BRICS auspices to follow their goals with the Western countries, and you know, are they ready to forfeit their relation with the Western countries for the BRICS? So those are the questions. And you know, but what Russia is doing is just to ensure that it is not maintaining an isolationist policy. But to what extent are those people that are calling the new members and the old members going to follow the Russian agenda? So that should be the main focus. So the main focus about BRICS now is not about expansionism. It is now about unity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Olawale. Very important points that you've raised, and I take away the fact that there are different incentives, different interests, even among the BRICS countries vis-a-vis the coups. But I think overall, none of them has been eager to, in a sense, condemn or cut off ties, or to try to push for civilian return to civilian rule in the various countries, which is quite interesting also in light of what's been discussed with regards to international law, for example. So we are joined now also by one of our contributors, Andrea Molinari. And so for you, we have two questions. Welcome. And if you can please just briefly kindly introduce yourself, and then tell us whether, in your view, this summit, this most recent summit, was among the most significant or among the least significant of the BRICS summit. And then I'll have a question based on your joint paper with Rocio.
Good morning, at least for us. I'm sorry to get late, but it's very early in the morning in Argentina, and we had family businesses around here before getting into the meeting. My name is Andrea Molinari. I am a researcher here in Argentina. I am also a professor at the University of Buenos Aires, teaching international economics. So I am not an expert on G20. I teach international financial architecture issues, but mainly through the field of development financing. So I am more of an expert on development banks than on the G20. What I've seen about the G20 over the last years, and maybe Rocio, you want to also complement what I'm saying, is that the G20 has not really been a forum where developing countries can really solve their financial issues or financial incompatibilities and problems. This is something that has happened with our debt restructuring, is something that has happened with our place in the Bretton Woods organizations in many aspects. Argentina has a lot of history on debt restructuring and a lot of failures in debt restructuring. And this has not really been a good highlight for us in general. What I do see as a good thing about the BRICS is that they are kind of confronting this G20, the triad that they always say about financialization, liberalization. They're always talking about G7 issues, and they keep on this mantra that we perhaps are not so what we say in developing world, global South. It's a great discussion what the global South is saying. I think that what Olawale was saying, I just got the end of his exposition, but I think that in general, unity is not something, unfortunately, that the global South is a characteristic of. So in general, what I see about the G20 is that it hasn't really been up to what the global South need. And the BRICS is trying to confront that, but not in a way that perhaps the Banco del Sur, the Southern Bank, I don't know how exactly to translate it. It's not this bank that Venezuela and Brazil and Argentina were trying to, we're creating at the same pace as the new development banks, the NDB and the AIB. So basically, it's not a disruptive way that the BRICS are bringing here. It's a very interesting thing that we have Russia, and we have very different powers, but they are trying to show, I think it's like a manifestation of the global South, that we need stronger institutions that really do what the G20 has come to do, which is to help every country in their financial struggle. So I'm not really answering your question. I haven't really been following so close the Russian summit, but I do think that in general terms, what we see is that not a disruptive way of coming to the financial scene, but we are seeing that the countries are trying to raise their voice. No, the World Bank has given a very small portion of the stocks of the voting power to these countries. Although some of our countries even lost in this last restructuring voting power, from a very small voting power to a smaller voting power, the BRICS countries are there and they make a difference. I think it's a very powerful group. On the other hand, you have credit rating agencies talking about agency risk, and in terms of, for example, the New Development Bank, they are talking about the differences in between the BRICS countries, that this is a challenge, and that's why they don't get the best rating possible, the AAA. So it's a mixed feeling in general, but I think that the BRICS has come a long way trying to give some responses to the global South in terms of financial architecture.
Thank you so much, Andrea.
Maybe I think you want to add something?
Yes. So in terms of the BRICS, so you've touched on the efforts. They're not that disruptive, but is there reception, and what is the magnitude of growth? Is the New Development Bank emerging as an alternative, as it might have hoped to become, or it's not making a big splash?
No, I think it is making a big splash. I think that especially for the countries, and especially because of its sovereign idea of local currency lending and really accompanying the BRICS in their own challenges, I think it does make a difference. The only thing is that when you have a country which is forbidden to take loans because of political problems, this is kind of replicated. And there are a lot of Bretton Woods things being replicated in this bank and in the AIB as well. No, but it still feels like a different way of doing business. It does, at least in the banks. And BRICS are also trying to now have this payment system where they try to avoid a little bit of the dollar. All of this is absolutely positive, not without struggle and not without conflicts, because again, we are very different countries. If you join these 5 countries together, they are like really, really different cultures, different countries. Even within Latin America, within Africa, you have a lot of different voices. I don't believe, I am no African, but I don't believe that South Africa really represents Africa. I don't believe that Brazil really represents Latin America, but I think these are very strong countries in our continent. So I think that it does make a difference for sure, and it has made noise. This is something that is very good for the development world. Of course, there will be different stimulus from the outside, which will say, well, maybe some things are not working as they should be working, but I think that it has come a long way. It's really lent a lot of money to countries to complement, and this is something that both new banks are saying constantly. They are complementing what the Bretton Woods banks are doing. They are not coming in a disruptive way to the financial architecture. Maybe the counterfactual here was this Banco del Sur that really did come to change every rule, no? And it's not operative. It never lends any loans because of political issues mainly. So no, I do think they make a difference, absolutely. Politically, which is, I think, the most important thing here, and economically as well.
Thank you so much, Andrea, for that overview. So now it seems finance is the theme so far, also in the question and answer, in the questions from the audience. So the first question is, do you think the new development bank would be the organization approving the new currency? So I think Gift, this you can give this one a go, but also we're open to anyone from the floor who may want to add something. I think perhaps Rocio and Andrea may want to as well, given the focus of their paper. So there's a talk of a BRICS currency. Do you think the NDB, I suppose as it is, would be the organization approving or issuing such a new currency?
Okay, thank you so much, Prof. I think in terms of the NDB, I think my previous colleague also touched a bit on that, because as we know that the NDB is part of BRICS actually, and we know that it was established in 2015. So now, in terms of the BRICS currency, I think that the NDB, whether we like it or not, because it has to work with other central banks, so that the BRICS currency it can be approved. And there might be even some pushbacks, from powerful countries. We can still talk about the USA, because as much as we want to push the BRICS currency, like as BRICS countries, we cannot operate on our own. We still need some countries to work together with. So, and I think in terms of finances and in terms of the approval of currencies and stuff, I think the NDB, it does play a huge role. But remember, the NDB's major role, mostly what it does, it focuses more on financing infrastructure, it focuses more on loans and stuff to BRICS countries, but it does have a role to play. But however, it has to work with other central banks so that the BRICS currency can be approved. Thank you so much, Prof.
Thank you very much, colleague. Then anyone else maybe would like to add some thoughts here. Please, Andrea.
Yes, no, absolutely. I completely agree with Gift. The regional payment system, which is what they are trying to install or to create, is something that is mainly managed by central banks, because it's an accounting system where you have a clearance period in which you will interchange goods without any hard currency to go to, and then at the end of this clearance period, the central banks will clear everything. Having said that, of course, it will depend on the NDB how legitimate or how used this currency is, because they could, of course, give loans in this currency if there will be, if they do end up having a currency. They can also have this clearance system in their own currency. So it depends on how exactly this ends up going. So The NDB will not be a bank that they will not be the European Central Bank. This is something that if they wanted to create some central bank, they will have to create a BRICS central bank. This will be the institution that would manage the new currency if they do create one. They can go one step behind before that. That is this clearance system, which is simpler, and a lot of countries do have it. But doesn't, unfortunately, for developing countries, is not really a lot of very well used. I mean, there are a lot of different experiences around the world, even going back to the USSR, that they have like this clearance system with Finland. I mean, there are a lot of different examples in the history. But you do need to have the central banks talking to each other, and of course the maximum case is this the euro, no, and that's kind of fully into the monetary coordination and unification. But you have a spectrum also of different choices to make, and I believe they will start with some clearance system which is simpler and less politically, and it leaves less space for political attacks as well, which is, I think, something the BRICS have really to take care of.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, colleagues. Anyone perhaps want to share a view on this? And maybe just what do we think about the plausibility of a BRICS currency? Because it seems to me there are two thoughts going on. One is de-dollarization, less hegemony for the US dollar. And that has been an articulated policy if you look at the BRICS declarations. But what I've not seen in the official BRICS documentation is an idea of a BRICS currency as such. And I think a lot of it has to do with the obstacles that you've both mentioned. You would need a central bank. You would need basically to harmonize the financial systems of countries, and I don't see India allowing that to happen with China. I don't see even China allowing that to happen with Russia, for that matter, let alone then the rest of the countries, Egypt and Ethiopia. There are differences as well. So, I mean, is this a plausibility? So on the one hand, you have de-dollarization. On the other, you have this notion that has just come about from, I think, non-state actors really than the BRICS members themselves, about a BRICS currency. So maybe what do we think about the notion of de-dollarization? Is it needed perhaps, and how might it be achieved then, if not through a BRICS currency? I'd love to, maybe if there's anyone who would like to share a view there. Gift, I think maybe you want to.
Yes.
Okay, and Mihaela,
okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Prof. I think at the opening of my statement, I've mentioned that there's a lot of like there are pros and cons, or there are opportunities and still there are challenges, because as I've said that BRICS, it consists of both developed countries and then consists of those developing countries, and that gap, it has to be closed in terms of having the united currency or one monetary system, because in the meeting that took place in October, but it says that the term that was used, it was not the unified currency system, but it was the BRICS pay. You can even check it out, the BRICS pay, whereby it was even mentioned to say that, because why do we have these BRICS countries, why do they need their own currency? Is because we can talk about countries like Russia. Those countries, they've been sanctioned, and that's one of the reasons why they want to pursue this BRICS currency, to say that yes, dollar it has been existing for years, but in terms of trading, it promotes unfair trading, and mostly in the LDCs, or the less developed countries. So now the issue of BRICS currency was to say that let's have fair trade amongst countries, but a step way to get closer to the BRICS currency. Right now, what BRICS countries, what they are doing, they are trading using their local currencies. Because as I said that we are not closer in terms of finalizing the BRICS currency. But in the meantime, what can we do as BRICS countries to promote fairness in terms of trading? What can we do before we can get to that 20 year plan or 10 year plan, but what can we do currently? So, and what they're doing, Professor, is that all these BRICS countries, they trade in local currencies. That's one of the strategies that they're trying to use in terms of moving away from dollar. So we can talk about India. India currently, they are using rupee to pay for Russian oil. And also China is also doing the same with Russia and even South Africa. We can even talk about even the relationship between South Africa and China. Right now we have fair trade between China and Russia, between China and South Africa. We even have a lot of companies right now in South Africa. We have more developing companies, again, also in China. We can even talk about in terms of gold, in terms of gold reserves. We know that a lot of gold right now is being bought by the Chinese in South Africa. That's part of the reason to say that, can we at least have a fair trade as BRICS countries, but check the trade between the USA and South Africa in terms of our minerals. They are really exploiting us. So now the issue of this currency, it's a year plan, is the vision in terms of where these countries want to go. But how do we get there? Now we must start from somewhere. And the start is, let's trade with our local currencies so that it can be fair to everyone. And also the diversify in terms of and also in terms of diversifying payment system. You know, we can talk about the BRICS nation they want to adopt. You know, there's what called the SWIFT, is the system of transfer for financial messages. So this system, it was implemented by Russia and also Chinese system. They've established a system called the cross-border interbank payment system. All the systems, they are fair in terms of when these countries, they do business amongst themselves. So why do we have most countries who are interested in joining BRICS? These are some of the reasons. Because if it was not fair, then BRICS, it was not going to last. BRICS, it was not going to last. But now BRICS is attracting a lot of countries. It is because they can see that the dollar is being there, but it has exploited a lot of countries, especially as African countries. You know, I can talk about South Africa. I've already touched in terms of South Africa. And also this can take us back in terms of the NDB. You know, we spoke about that the main reason that why we have one of the goals of the NDB, or one of their priorities, to say that, okay, in terms of loans, let it be fair. Let it be fair to this country so that they can take whatever money and then they improve their economy. But if we have to do that via a lot of international banks, international central banks, it exploits a lot of countries. And mostly we can talk about the less developed countries are the ones that suffer a lot. Thank you so much. And also, Prof, just to add on in terms of what Donald Trump said, you know, I can see there's a lot of things that Donald Trump, yes, I know wants to increase tariffs and stuff. Donald Trump is the president of the USA, and it is his duty to protect his currency. It is his duty. So as BRICS, it is also our duty to protect ourselves. It is also our duty. So whatever Donald Trump is doing, it is his duty to protect his currency. It is his job to protect his economy. And even us as BRICS countries, it is also our duty to protect ourselves. And indeed, at the end, we will see, Prof. Thank you.
Yeah, fantastic points raised there. I want to come back to that. You've triggered something quite significant there. But thank you very much, Gift. Let's go now to Mihaela.
I think a lot has been discussed now to cover some of the key issues on BRICS currency. One thing that's very telling to me is that Russia is super passionate about de-dollarization agenda, and BRICS currency was not playing a main role at the Kazan summit, where basically Russia decided that there is not enough consensus to push it forward. So in a way, there was an assessment that, like, this is not an issue where a victory can be made or something to show for in terms of the summit. And I was watching the debates before the South Africa BRICS summit, And it was also the question, is it on the agenda, is it not on the agenda? But if we look at who is actually pushing for that, we are looking at Russia, we are looking at Brazil, and President Lula was the one who suggested that BRICS currency should follow like the euro model. But at the same time, these other countries do not want to get rid of their own currencies. I mean, we have processes of internationalization of yuan, and it's not in countries' interest to move forward on that agenda. So if there is anything on that front to happen, we need to watch what's happening during Brazil's presidency. And if they can make a move on that, if they can't, then it's just sidelined. I think there is one other thing from Kazan summit that struck me, and this is the BRICS grain exchange. And I'm wondering whether the de-dollarization pathway is actually through the side door, like through doing the grain exchange type work and then trying on something very niche and then saying, oh, and now we can all exchange in, differently and we can all like move away from the dollar. So I'm wondering if that's more of a strategy that you are basically trying to find little areas of agreement and then build on them to get into these larger scale actions. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Mihaela. Important question there. And now let's go to Andrea.
Thank you. Yeah, just to complement what Gift and Mihaela were saying, when just recapping on one local thing here, when Lula was in the election stream, I mean, he was proposing what he was going to do. One of the things he proposed was to have a common currency with Argentina. We do have a system, this exchange system of local currencies with Brazil, which is not really being used, but it's in place. We have a system in all of ALADI, all of Latin American countries can exchange within a system where they are, I mean, what these systems do is not a common currency. What it does is two things. First, it, as Gift was saying, is it allows you to trade in your local currency up to a point. So you save a lot of money in terms of not having to go to the dollar or to the hard currency every time you make an international trade operation. And this also helps you with your external restriction because you don't have to get the dollars or whatever hard currency you're using to really, again, go back to your balance of payments. So this was a proposal, a political proposal by Lula. We couldn't advance. We are in a different political situation at the moment in Argentina. That didn't go through, but we do have a system, a payment system which works. It's not really very, very used in Argentina. It's more used in Brazil. And I agree with Mihaela that maybe what this was doing, and that's what Lula is also putting it through, is he's trying to de-dollarize. And of course, Vaso, this is something that has to be done. I mean, of course, I think every developing country is trying to get out a little bit at least of the dollar because of its hegemony and its dominance in the world. What I'm not so sure is what's the currency we have to go to, because we also don't want to fall into the problem that we are going to all get in renminbis, So this is something that I think it will be a struggle in terms of how you will, because this currency, if you have a common currency, the euro has countries which are not in the eurozone, but these currencies have to float against the euro. So it will be very politically complicated to say, well, which will be the anchor currency here, no? But I do think that it's a very intelligent way of going with the NDB, lending local currency, in parallel with this payment system that maybe it can get through because it's just an agreement between central banks, and what it does saves you hard currency. So I think it should be good, at least for a start, and if it's really used, then they probably will want to go somewhere a little bit deeper.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Andrea. It just strikes me that currencies are also very emotional entities, right? I mean, that's why we put our national heroes on our currencies. So I think it'll be a tall order to replace, and as you rightly say, replace it with what? I think because they're not just mechanisms of exchange, as economists in that pure sense would have us believe, but they are political artifacts in a sense. And a great point you've raised, Mihaela, in terms of something unique about Brazil, particularly when it is under, I would say, Lula or sort of Lula-like philosophy with regards to a more of an EU model with regards to the notion of de-dollarization. And also the point about the BRICS grain exchange. And that leads me to a question that we have on the chat box, because it strikes me that part of what would make that succeed as a way into de-dollarization would, of course, be trade among the BRICS countries. How much do they trade with each other? Or do they mainly trade with China? Sometimes the BRICS comes across as, in terms of the commercial side, it's everybody trading with China, not so much with each other. And maybe if somebody has a sense of that just statistically, but I know surely in the case of South Africa that is the case. There is some growth, of course, in terms of trade with the other countries, but it's mostly with China. And so the question that we have is about these bilateral relations. And so the question says, what impact do you think multilateral organizations such as the BRICS have in bilateral relationships, such as the relationship of Brazil and Egypt? And I might add there, is the BRICS a kind of matchmaker in light of what's been said? Most of the trade is with China and everybody else. And so is the BRICS kind of inverting that? Is it acting as a matchmaking mechanism between these other countries bilaterally? And maybe for Olawale, we might add the nuance of Africa, because now there's 3 African countries, all of whom are kind of regional hegemons within their spaces. And so have you seen, or do you anticipate that the BRICS will be facilitating more, in a way, intercontinental trade, or stronger bilateral ties among these African countries? But an open question to everyone, really. Are you seeing the BRICS facilitate stronger bilateral ties among its members? So maybe Olawale, let's start with you, and then let's see other colleagues may want to chip in.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to take it right away from where Andrea stopped about the BRICS currency. And it's a policy. And like Professor Gift said, that Trump had the opportunity to and has the whole responsibility. It's just like something like responsibility to protect his own dollar against any form of this kind of unipolar system, and just wants to maintain the America will be great again thing, and you want to stay at the top. So there is nothing wrong there if BRICS wants to launch its own currency. It is a policy, and when they launch it, either it's successful or it fails. So it shouldn't just be about dislocating the dollar. I think it is something that can thrive alongside with the dollar if it is properly implemented. Then the other one about the bilateral relation, yes, definitely. I think that should be the major goal of BRICS for even for the currency we are discussing, and for what Professor Gibbs said about the trading relation and using the local currency to trade in a way to dislodge the dollar, if that is the major goal of BRICS. So for instance, in the case of Africa, if BRICS is going to surpass the influence of America and European countries in Africa, then it has to ensure that all the African countries that are under BRICS, well, 3 for now, South Africa, Egypt, and Ethiopia, they have to establish a bilateral, a very, very strong one, and not only within themselves, they also have to extend it to other BRICS members. But like Professor Basso said about China being the Chinese goal about Africa is about trade. And the excellent part is the BRI, the Belt Road Initiative, and the infrastructural loans, which China was just doling out to a lot of African countries, assisting them in their engagement and everything. So if Russia too has to look at Russia is preoccupied with the politics, with the sales of weapons, and the trading aspect is very, very little, unlike China, while India and Brazil too is also preoccupied with the trade, buying of goods and also investing in goods. And there was a time I was reading some papers, and I also see the Gulf Countries Cooperation, GCC, also the Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and the rest, also making a very serious incursion into Africa. So BRICS should not even see their incursion as something against America alone. They are now contexting with a lot of power bodies, and they just have to find a way to establish their home ground. So in establishing that ground, bilateral relation is a very core aspect. Then also, if the goal, like I always say, if the goal, Russia is kind of difficult to read. So if the primary goal is to bring back the Cold War tension in the economic aspect, then they must ensure that all BRICS members must relate with each other, whether they are in this continent or in Asia or in Europe. You must have to relate with each other, and they have to make sure that consolidation of members is very important before expansionism. You should not just expand and expand and expand and expand without consolidation of members. So when you add a new member, you must ensure that that particular member is well integrated before you bring up another member. But when you start having a lot of members without proper integration, it's just like an house of cards, and in no meantime, it will disband.
Thank you so much, Olawale. Any other perspective on this? Anyone would like to add anything? Okay, so I will say from an academic standpoint, I think this has been one of the kind of quiet successes of the BRICS initiative. There has been increased interaction in terms of university internationalization among the BRICS countries. I think thanks in large part to the BRICS Academic Forum, and I'm noting Olawale, because currently we have a number of Brazilian students here at the University of Johannesburg. We have a number of colleagues who actually in Russia and India, who I think outside of these resources, frankly, that are provided by the BRICS Academic Forum would not have taken place. So I think this has been one of the aspects of the BRICS initiative that have seen some success. And let's go back to Olawale.
Yeah, so I just want to chip in something about the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, the AFTA of the thing that was championed by the African Union. And in the West African sub-region also, we have the ECOWAS establishing some kind of a bilateral relation. So if you are drawing principles from African Union and ECOWAS and SADC, South African Development Commission, you will see that the question of currency is not an easy one. It requires a lot of policy commitment. It is as far as it's an international thing, it is also a domestic thing. You are trying to infuse yourself into another strata. So, and it has been very difficult for African countries to even have a common currency, even regionally, to have a common currency. And that is the major reason why you see African Union, they opted for the aspect of trade. That if you are going to reposition Africa in the world affair, okay, let us start with the Continental Free Trade Agreement. And you will see that what Professor Gift described about trading within BRICS is the same thing that is applicable to the case of African Continental Free Trade Agreement. That if Africa is not going to be dependent on the West, or maybe the BRICS, some agree that they are also here for neo-colonialism of a thing. So if they're going to dislodge themselves from the BRICS, African came together and said, okay, let us establish a trading relation between ourselves. So now, if BRICS 2 is going to dislodge the neo-colonialism of the West, establishing a trading relation between themselves is very fundamental.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that, Olawale. Now, Olawale, it said I think a very interesting word, new Cold War, right? And I also recall Gift's point about American president, of course, should advance America's best interest as he understands them. And you also said the BRICS countries should do the same. So I have a question about this, but I note Andrea's hand.
No, I think it's very stimulating, and I do share every one of the points that are being made. I just wanted to add, in some years ago, I was researching a lot on South-South cooperation, which is something that, of course, is almost non-existent between Africa and Latin America. Africa and Latin America are two regions who don't look at each other, except for maybe the Luso-speaking countries with Brazil. Kind of, this is kind of what we have, or Cuba going in peace operations to some countries which were in war many years ago. So we don't have a lot of talking with each other, and I think maybe this is a good opportunity. The BRICS and the noise BRICS is making, maybe it's a good thing to really make us talk to each other. And as a former also trade economist, I do see that it's very complicated to make countries to trade when there is no business there, because states are not the one which trade. These are businessmen which have to see the business. Of course, countries could take the entrepreneurs to the fellow country and show him the markets, and this is something that, of course, every government should be doing, to open markets and to really help the country to develop. But trade is not something, unfortunately, that you can direct so much. And trade is already very dislocated and very unintegrated within our regions and even in certain countries themselves. So it's a very complicated and challenging issue. I think that starting from the currency, even though that's complicated enough, would be a good start to really see how really it goes. Maybe then that every country ends up trading with China, but even that is going to be better, that the countries having to go to the dollar and then having to be able to exchange with China, which is absolutely, it's a bit kind of counterintuitive, no? I mean, countries have to get dollars, China has to get dollars as well. Everybody has to go to the dollar to really, in order to trade. So getting that out of the way maybe clears up a little bit the mist and let us see how exactly trade flows end up going.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Andrea, for these points. Yeah, I just remembered a few years ago, I think 2018, I looked at, I like this point about countries really don't do trade. It's the non-state actors, the businesses that enhance that trade. And then we look at the macro figures and say, well, China and whoever are trading this much. But it's really businesses and consumers. And a few years ago, I did a study on what do the stock markets of the BRICS countries look like in terms of, are there BRICS countries buying shares in businesses of the other BRICS countries? Because this was one of the initiatives they undertook, I think in 2016, actually really nothing new under the sun, to allow fellow BRICS countries to buy shares in their own currencies in companies that are located in any of the BRICS countries. And actually, the figures were not that promising. It was very, very low in terms of stock market integration or stock purchasing of shares in other BRICS countries. And again, allowed to do so in their own currencies to remove this extra hurdle. But my question then, I think to sort of close off, is the idea of a new Cold War, right? So we've heard a lot about what I can call alternative financial institutions, even alternative international law from Zalama Matebula, and also different approaches to coups that take place, different reactions to coups. And so my question then would be, and in light also of what was said about American president has to advance the American interest, and the BRICS have to advance their own interest, either individually or collectively. And so my question would be, are we in a new Cold War? And maybe everyone can just briefly state their opinion on this. Let's start with Rocio.
Well, quickly, I would say no. Maybe it's not so clear that there are two blocs that think very differently in all topics or in the structure. Of course, there are fights, there are different interests instead in either in the bloc, in the BRICS, many things that they couldn't reach is because they have different interests. Where some colleagues talk about India and China and the leadership of the bloc and the leadership of the region. But I would say that it's not clear to me that there are two blocs very different with borders. Of course, it's important the commercial war between quotes China and United States, and it seems that some moments that fight is stronger, and in other moments, although Trump, because if we remember the last Trump presidents, it has some moments that the fight increase and other ones they negotiate. Sorry, but I would say that for me it's not very clear that it's a Cold War.
Thank you very much, Rocio. And now let's go to Mihaela.
So I'm not sure I'm watching the Cold War part that much. I think that there is certainly greater polarization, but what I'm watching is the collective action. So is it possible to have collective action at the universal level, which means like, can we address climate change? Can we address AI? One thing that I am worried about is, especially with these questions about, what is the new role of G20? What is the new role of BRICS? To what extent are we investing into coexistence and collective action at the global level versus like these different fragmented parts? So in a way, I'm always trying to see how it all adds up so that we can still be the same system, right? Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Mihaela. I think Rocio and Mihaela are the two optimists so far on Olawale. Please unmute.
Okay, thank you very much about the question. I brought up the issue of the Cold War of the thing, and what I want to mention is to Russia is the Cold War is not as if it was except for the proxy battles, it was not as if it was the context of the code is what I'm trying to just explain. That currently, despite the fact that the war, it is just like it's just like what it means. The code is very cold. It is an economic war, and no countries pronouncing that is against each other. The dollarization of the thing, it is scholars and policymakers that are trying to read inferences into international events and see that, okay, the way Russia is, and the BRICS are bringing up their policy. I think these policies are targeted towards the West. And so the major argument I'm saying is the Cold War is because it is cold in the real sense, because the BRICS are not coming out and saying, no, we don't want dollar. They said they want to create an alternative one. So why create an alternative one when there is one? The implication is that you are kind of creating a form of resistance against. So it is not a pronounced. So when I brought up the word the Cold War, I'm not saying it is a pronounced war. There won't be proxy wars. There won't be Korea. There will not be another second Korean war, and another second Vietnam, or maybe the Congo crisis and the thing. No. But these countries are trying as much as possible to replace each other in the international system. And the major argument is that the era of the unipolar American system is gone, and they want to have a multilateral system, a multipolar system back. And to have a multipolar system back, then you have to, the economic aspect is very crucial, as well as the military and the rest. So my context of Cold War is just like an economic struggle. Let me stop there.
Thank you so much for that, Olawale. Well, I wouldn't be so shy if I was you, because I would also have in mind the tariff war that is waged by the US towards China, the context of NATO and BRICS. I think fault lines are somewhat emerging, but well noted. Thank you so much, Olawale. And let's go now to Andrea.
Yes, I'm afraid I'm not so optimistic. I'm kind of in the middle, no? I mean, I'm not so optimistic as of not seeing a war at all. I do see multiple wars. I do see multiple conflicts. And I do see that despite all of those conflicts, the world, the global South is advancing clumsily, not in a very neat way, and as probably did the Europeans, which were, okay, this is a Marshall Plan, we are going to get used to the Marshall Plan, and then we're going to create, and then they have their own currency. It has been very well ordered. I don't think any of our countries are capable of following that example. I'm not sure I do want to follow that example, but I think that that's kind of the way the world has come to here. And there are a lot of challenges that the only thing that I do wish is that we would really understand that we have to face them together. And this unity word that I think Olawale was bringing, I think is very, very powerful and very important. We need to get, this is not okay, we are all friends. This is not about that, but even about business. Even when you talk about business and developing your own economies, and of course politically, we need friends and we need associates and we need partners. And this is something that should bend us together, even if we are very different culturally. And this is what I hope that brings together BRICS. Having a common enemy, or having something to fight against could be a way, but I think that it will become conflictive. We have a lot of conflicts right now, even, to get started, a lot of different challenges that political mainly challenges, but also economical ones. But I think that unity should arise somehow between some countries, and that could be a good example for other countries to join and to really strengthen this unity. But this is not just about, okay, let's get rid of the dollar. I don't think we'll ever get rid of the dollar, but at least it will balance a little bit more the powers in the world. And I think that if we reached that in some years, in some decades, that would be frankly a success. So I'm not sure this is really about winning or losing. It's about transiting this period that we are facing the most harmoniously possible, and trying to really confront and try to make use of our common challenges to get stronger as developing countries. Just one little thing about what Olawale was saying. I do believe that also having said all of this, consolidation is much, much more important than enlargement. Also bringing the example of the EU. I mean, the EU, when they saw that there were issues that they couldn't discuss, they couldn't discuss further, like labor and a lot of different challenges they were facing, they enlarged. And I don't think BRICS really should be doing a lot of that. Of course, it should bring more countries in, and that's important. But I think that the consolidation of the global South with these leaders would be also a good thing to follow for every global South country. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Nzali?
Yeah, thank you, Prof. And yes, those are good arguments by colleagues, but I have a way different argument. So the argument really rests on these two theories to say that we can anticipate a war, and this is because there's this pushback from an already inherently unequal system that exists. And it is less likely that when you want to take power in a system that is unequal, the person who is powerful or an established power would just look at you take that power. So it relates more towards a Thucydides trap and maybe a Cold War, because you see a contemporaneous synchronized effect of how countries are then actually disputing a system that has. So what you find is there's a death of an old system and there's a rebirth of a new system that we would refer to as the New World Order. But this New World Order is contested, of course, And according to the post-international theory and heterarchy, it says that norms, globalization, and have a quite central role to play in dictating the geopolitical structure as we know it today. And we can tell by the idealism, as one of the colleagues mentioned, on how ideas can be concrete. And many of these ideas then become some form of an ideological influence in many of the states. So what we find with the BRICS is many of the countries are not necessarily, it cannot be in practice. You cannot necessarily rely on the practice of how you should be or how you would look as a BRICS country, but it's more on the ideological differences. So what you find is you have a number of countries that then start to believe in multilateralism. They start to believe in many of the ideologies that are actually conceptualized by the BRICS countries. And that's when a Cold War actually emerges from, whereby you have contesting ideologies that exist at a global level, whereby you have multilateralism and you have unipolar system that has thrived for many of the years. So in heterarchy, in the sense, would then argue that we have a number of states that with different ideologies that coexist within the same system. So this simply means that we have two bulls in a crowd. That's a proverb that we mostly use, whereby we have two powerful systems that exist in one system. And what you find is you have a number of strategic players, like we find with Russia, China, South Africa being at the forefront of now trying to dictate policy on how the world should move forward. And therefore, because the system was unequal in the first place, it becomes hard for anything or any alternative would then be seen as a threat inherently, whereby they would think that maybe if countries try to create a BRICS currency, then it is a threat to, it is de-dollarization, but no, actually it is an alternative form. But provided that the system was equal, then countries wouldn't be jealous of each other, if I could put it in layman terms. But because obviously we live in a realist world whereby everyone is trying to gauge power, everyone is gunning for power, every state is gunning for power. Whatever way works for them, whether it's liberal, whether it's realist, whether it's constructivist, they will always have to move forward with that way. And therefore, because of the system since the end of the World War II, the Bretton Woods system, which has been predominantly dominant in its form, anything that comes to the fore as new and novel acts as a threat, because now we have this rising power trying to actually remove and establish power, which is the USA. So most definitely we can have a series of Cold War, provided that we have the BRICS that is becoming strong every day, even if in some instances they have this form of, because they've grown so well in a very quiet manner, if I would. So you have this form of quiet audacity towards advancing global agendas. So most definitely the world is changing, and we can never have a change without a fallout. So yeah, there is a Cold War, and maybe a decided threat. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nzali, for that perspective. Then Gift.
Okay, thank you so much, Prof. Prof, I agree with my colleagues, because I think every time we talk about the BRICS currency and stuff, the de-dollarization. No, the main purpose of BRICS in terms of currency and stuff, yes, the war is brewing. I can say Cold War is quite brewing, but what people don't get is that we are not saying that let's get rid of the dollar. You know, I think one of the colleagues mentioned this is because that we have been in a, I don't want to use the term abusive relationship for years, but something like that, to say, because if you can check in terms of trading, the import, the export, it's really unfair, and it's something that has been happening for years, for decades. So now the issue of BRICS in terms of currency and stuff, we are not saying that let's get rid of the dollar, but actually it is a sign of crying out loud, because countries have been crying, but nothing was done. Yes, dollar continued to dominate, and yet unfettered continue to be there. Countries have been complaining, but nothing was done, you know, and for years. So for now, I can say that countries, they have reached that peak in terms of bit of abuse of dollar. Let's talk about Zimbabwe in terms of sanctions. What happened to Zimbabwe? Because Zimbabwe was sanctioned because Robert Mugabe was saying that at least let there be fair trade between us. Then what happened? Because of that abuse, then what happened? It was sanctioned Zimbabwe. And now where is Zimbabwe today? So even though Zimbabwe is not part of BRICS, but they've sent up the application. But it's just to say that countries, they've been crying out loud to say that let's have a fair trade amongst us. There's no country that can live on its own. We need each other as countries. And let me touch a bit in terms of the Donald Trump. He cannot directly stop the establishment of the BRICS currency. But however, his policies and actions could influence the feasibility and the progress of such currency through economic, diplomatic, and financial means. Yeah, I rest my case there. Thank you so much, Prof.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Gift. Appreciate that. So, colleagues, thank you very much. We've reached the end of our program. Time flies very, very fast, simply because this is also engaging. So we've had such a wonderful conversation, varying, touching on many aspects, looking at BRICS Plus's activities, initiatives, ambitions, which sometimes are aligning. Often the BRICS is expanding, and I think it's always fascinating to observe as researchers and as policymakers. But all of this points really to an unsustainable status quo. I think every speaker today touched in some respects on that, be it on international law, international finance, international politics more broadly. And I think what is becoming clearer is what the BRICS is against, but it's not often clear what the BRICS as a collective stand for together. And of course, this all takes place against the backdrop of a climate change, of a burning planet, of the rise of artificial intelligence. And really, there's now greater need than ever for unity and collective action. These are all values that APRI actually stands for. And so I'd like to thank all of you for being here today. I'd like to thank our speakers, Rocio, Mihaela, Andrea, Nzali, Gift, and Olawele. And also our organizers at APRI and at UJ, my colleagues Serwa and Ada, who worked very, very hard over the past couple of months to make all this possible and achievable. And so, as I said, today is a launch, it's a reflection, but it's also a launch of these wonderful, wonderful articles that have been written over these past couple of months. And you can read them to hear more and to engage more of what our speakers today have shared. And you can access these on the APRI website. They are live for you to engage with. So till we meet again, and I anticipate it might be quite soon. So thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.